Assalamu alaikum. And okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, today we're actually going to be continuing yesterday. Yeah, I know we kind of took so long in talking about the details that we found in Tafseer al-Qurtubi regarding a number of different things. Number one, which was really, I guess, my favorite place of talking about Tafsir yesterday. How do we understand the different ways that different scholars had approached and covered the topic that relates to how do we do tazkiyah and at the same time uh, reduce or deal with the things that we enjoy that are considered halal. We're not talking about haram here. Okay, so yesterday when we were talking about taking something or engaging in the things that we love, etc., that wasn't talking about things that are haram. This was just plainly, literally talking about the things that are halal. So we went in details. Oh, okay. How about now, Nora? So we went in details in regards to the different ways that the different scholars had considered almost. Okay. How about now, Nora? So we talked about the different ways that scholars had approached uh, the way we would deal with halal items and for tazkiyah reasons. So whether we're speaking about, for example, the first opinion was considering that what we're supposed to be doing is reducing the amount of halal. So even halal, yes, reducing the amount and in fact trying to avoid it completely to a certain level. But that doesn't mean you're avoiding halal completely to the point where you're harming yourself. So that's one thing is that the Tabari, we talked about a Tabari and how he said, well, I don't know anything that's more dangerous and more harmful than eating rotten foods or eating basically things that are going to get you sick or get your brain sick or even things that are probably going to weaken you from worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was a thing. But we're speaking about items, let's call it not necessarily within the darurat. And we said that there are three different classifications. We said there's the classification of darura, which is necessity. The second classification was tahsinat, which basically adds, is a less or a lesser degree, and that would be of something that is crucial, but it is something that you can live without, okay? And it would just make your life, I guess, harder. And then the hajiyat, which would really be something that would make and like make your life better, definitely. And with you could still live without it. It would definitely be a plus, but you could live without it. Okay, so we're looking at those kind of items. We're looking at not the darurat, because if you're speaking about the things that you can't live without, whether we're speaking about proteins, veggies, a certain amount of carbs, a certain amount, for example, of the different fibers, etc., all these different areas. So you definitely need the 5 food groups. So this is going within a darura. So we weren't talking about the darurat yesterday. We were really talking about more tahsinat slash and al-hajiyat if we're speaking about things like, I don't know, extra things, perhaps sweets, perhaps desserts, all these different juices, etc. We're speaking about that. Should we eliminate it completely? According to some scholars, yes, that should be your goal. If you're trying to go up, eliminate that completely. The second opinion was no, don't eliminate it completely. Just take the amount that is, I guess, a sufficient amount in moderation. And that way, you won't necessarily get this urge that you want too much of it or that urge overcoming you. So you basically teach that urge, how to get a small amount, but not necessarily a big amount that's going to control you. So then the third opinion was considering that no, it's an issue of moderation, and it's not a big amount necessarily, to the point that it's controlling you. And certainly it's not a small amount, but it depends on the circumstance and looking at what we're talking about. And that was the opinion of moderation. So same thing when we're speaking about, all of that was just trying to explain the word, I guess, ولا تعتدوا. What does it mean, ولا تعتدوا? So لا تعتدوا, اعتد, or when you talk about to transgress, we're speaking about to go beyond the limit. And when it was talking about beyond the limit, you want to keep in mind that we're speaking about a perimeter from two ends. The first one was ifrat, and the other one is tafrit. It's basically between the two extremes, because the first extreme is when you're letting yourself loose, and you're just taking more and more halal, and your consumption is just exaggerated. That's one type of i'tida. That's one type of transgression. The second type of transgression is the other end, which is you completely avoiding all of those items that are probably even halal, or even probably darurat. So you're looking at the two extremes. So you're not avoiding everything completely, and you're not taking everything completely, but you're living in moderation. That was the third opinion, and wallahu a'lam, that is the preponderant ruling. But I just wanted to lay that out for you, because you will come across different scholars of tazkiyah. So if you were to go for Ibn al-Jawzi, for example, or you might see in Nawawi, he was avoiding things like watermelon. You want to keep in mind that he was living in Syria, so his fruits, I guess, and veggies were I guess different. So he was avoiding watermelon, he was avoiding cucumbers, he was avoiding so many different foods that were giving him, I guess, a sense of coolness, because he felt that that was putting him to sleep and just giving him a moment of relaxation. So he was avoiding a lot of foods, just to keep his, I guess, his alert in place. I don't know how watermelon, he saw that that was doing something to him. So I don't know what he really means by that. But of course, who am I to instruct in Nawawi on what actually makes a good level of tazkiyah, or a good interpretation for كُلُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا. So just wanted to keep that in mind, that you had scholars. We're not talking about laymen here. We're speaking about scholars, where they were at different levels of how they also approached what level they were trying to get to. And this is important because there's something really nice about Sufis, and at the same time, it can be used in the wrong way as well. But there's the Shaykh and there's the Murid. The Shaykh, would يطفوا الضوء والحمام والمطبخ. The Shaykh would mentor the students, which is al-Murid. Al-Murid would be the student, although sometimes, yes, a certain amount of abuse does happen, but the Shaykh would mentor the student on how to go up the ladder of tazkiyah. So he might often instruct him to avoid certain foods, to avoid certain friends, to avoid certain jobs, to avoid a certain environment, etc., in order to take him from one maqam to another maqam. And what they would consider maqamat, it's not the maqamat of music, but the maqam to mean the maqam that you're trying to go up the ladder in your spirituality. And this is what they would consider as maqam. Maqam from one place to a farther level, until you go up to the maqam that is the highest maqam of al-ihsan, etc. So certainly they would have different ways in how they can mentor. And that's the same thing when you're talking about many scholars. I guess the most important one we're talking about perhaps is secondary. You're talking about so many books out there. And Ibn Taymiyyah, I would say perhaps out of this whole debate, probably is the most misunderstood. Let me give you an idea about Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah, I think I can say, is him and Abu Ubaid. Ibn Taymiyyah, Abu Ubaid, Ibn Rushd, and al-Mawardi, al-Mirwizi or al-Maruzi were perhaps some of my favorite scholars for a number of different reasons. Even though each one was at a different era, each one was at a different society. In each one, I mean, you're talking about al-Mawardi, who was really close to the government, but you're talking about Ibn Taymiyyah, who actually chose to even get into prison than be within the community and getting, I guess, carried away with the society. So he chose to be in a place where it would allow him to get all the free time and the space, the free space to write. Who would want to go to prison? Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah was one of those scholars that really baffled me. When you read his books, you see a scholar that, well, first of all, he died 728 Hijrah. So we're speaking about an era, just an idea about this political situation at the time. The political situation was the Mongols. He was living in Syria. The Mongols had invaded already Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Iran, Iraq, committed crimes and genocides in Iraq, committed crimes and genocides in Syria, committed crimes and genocides in Afghanistan. Every single place they passed by, they committed genocides. Imagine killing 1 million people in Baghdad alone. Just imagine that. Everywhere. There was no place, nowhere to go but the smell of corpse and dead and deceased people was just everywhere. To the point that by the time they got to Syria and by the time they got to past Baghdad, they would tell them, hey, get me the dagger, I need to kill you now. And the person, the Muslim, will just be like, well, I'd rather get killed, without getting him outraged than actually killed sabran through torture. And we'll go get the dagger to get killed. Just imagine that. Not running away. I'll just go get the dagger and just die. That's how weak the Ummah was. You wouldn't imagine. Ibn Taymiyyah, the amount of, I guess, control and the amount of corruption that these Mongols were engaging in was so disgusting that Ibn Taymiyyah, even when the Mongols had converted to Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah was asked, hey, why don't you give fatwa that drinking is haram? And because they were continuously drinking. So Ibn Taymiyyah said about, in regards to the Mongols, that it would be better for them and safer for us to keep them drunk than to get them out of their drunken mind. And then they'll probably then be strong enough to commit more genocides. It's better for them to stay drunk, that is. safer for us. Just imagine the amount of fear that they were living. Ibn Taymiyyah, you look at his books, whether it's Al-Fatawa, Minhaj al-Sunnah, and you see a person that was exceptionally smart. The way that he debated, well, when it comes to debated Christianity, I've got my tahaffuz on that. I don't necessarily consider that it was his works. I would say that I don't want to say plagiarized, because definitely not plagiarism. He did actually refer to the scholars that he quoted from, but their way of referencing was completely different from our times. But so it wasn't really plagiarism in those that would want to accuse him of plagiarizing certain quotes or etc. I would say that no, I actually did a whole research just on a Jawab al-Sahih. But anyhow, but on the other topics, Sufism, you would see al-Fatawa. Many of those that wanted to use Ibn Taymiyyah for their extremism, I would say misquoted Ibn Taymiyyah. Because Ibn Taymiyyah, his method of debating those that were maybe Shias, like in Minhaj al-Sunnah, or perhaps in al-Fatawa, a lot of the Sufis, a lot of different deviated groups and deviant groups. He was using one way that was really common in his Fatawa or in his Minhaj al-Sunnah. Here's how he would do it. He would use the opinion that a person is probably trying to defend, and another opinion that they're completely against. And then he'll take the opinion that they're completely against and look at the paradigm that they had used to prove that they're completely against that. And he will take the paradigms and say, well, here's how you're contradicting yourself by that other opinion that you're completely defending. You contradicted those paradigms. So he'll use their paradigms, their ways of supporting opinion A, and he'll take those points and say, well, you already supported opinion A using 1, 2, 3 methods, then by 1, 2, 3 methods, then you're going to basically need to refute point B. So this is the method that he'll use. Many times you will see people like certain Ash'ara or different groups, they will misunderstand his method, and they will think he's defending point A. They will misunderstand his intelligence. His intelligence is so smart in how he can scrutinize those ideas and actually come about with these points. So smart. And Ibn Taymiyyah, the reason why I'm talking about Ibn Taymiyyah for this tafsir, even though you don't see the name coming across here, is that Ibn Taymiyyah did actually talk about Sufism in many ways to refute different things in regards to Sufism, but at the same time, I would also say he was misunderstood in the method and the approach that he was suggesting, and that not always was he against the different methods of Sufis. I would say he was against the extremism that was in some of the Sufi approaches. Some of the Sufis were definitely really extreme. So that's what he was against. but he wasn't completely and wasn't entirely against Sufism, and that many times you could see that with Ibn al-Qayyim, you could see a type of a Sufi approach in his books. You could definitely see, and you want to consider, and you want to just keep in mind that Ibn al-Qayyim, to him, Ibn Taymiyyah was his main sheikh. You're looking at al-Dhahabi, you're looking at Ibn Kathir, you're looking at Ibn Rajab. Those were considered, each one of these, those were considered like a group. Like a group. They were a group together of almost 8 people, and they themselves, just these 8 people, they had created, I would say, a revolution until the time today. And who was their leader? It was Ibn Taymiyyah. It was Ibn Taymiyyah. And this group created a revolution in how we understand tafseer, how we understand fiqh, how we understand Sufism, Aqidah, etc. And you're speaking at a time when the Ummah was succumbing to the political situation to the point that they had considered themselves that there's no way that we can gain victory any longer. We're defeated entirely. The Mongols are nothing but Ya'juj and Ma'juj. This is the mindset that was at the time. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are basically, to them, nobody but the Mongols. This is what they had seen. You want to understand, if they're seeing the Mongols as nothing but Ya'juj and Ma'juj, what that means is that they consider that that's it. There's no way to work anything out because we're at the times of Judgment Day. We're just waiting for the Judgment Day to happen. That's how they saw the whole thing. That these are Ya'juj and Ma'juj. That's it. We had so many different Dajjalin come out, so one of them must have been a Dajjal. And this is Ya'juj and Ma'juj. That's it. We're just waiting for the whole world to end. Just imagine that. And you could see that within this group, whether we're speaking about Ibn Kathir, who died 707 Hijriya, we're talking about al-Dhahabi, who was also with them. We're talking about al-Hafidh ibn Rajab, even though he died at age 45. And we're talking about Ibn al-Qayyim. Okay, this group, and there are a couple more, but those are the names that I had talked about often. So you should be familiar with those names by now. Okay, and you're looking at these scholars that until the time of today, I would say they created this ground of how we understand spirituality, how we understand aqidah, how we understand tafsir, how we reshape our understanding of how we understand ourselves and how we relate to the world around us. If you look at the era of Ibn Taymiyyah and the time today, even though it was 700 years back, or 800 years, 700 and something years back, okay, you're looking at, ironically, the political situation was very, very similar to today. Very similar to today, where they were just colonized under this colonization that is brutal, very confusing. The Muslims were completely forgetting their deen. They were right now going back to literally just practicing I don't want to say idolatry, but they were literally just practicing nothing but going and considering that the people in the graves were the area and the source of life and the source of hope, and that the different things that are happening in the society, there's nothing that we could do about it. Hey, these people that are colonizing us, they had overcome us. We've got no power. That's it. The Muslims, they're doomed, etc. That's exactly the same mentality. And you want to keep in mind that it was so strange that the Muslims at the time, and in particular in Syria, in particular in Lebanon, they were actually considered the best in making weapons. They were considered the best in making weapons. Their weapons were considered the best, but they weren't defeated because they didn't have the right weaponry. They were defeated because their identity was in the wrong place. The way they thought of themselves, they were defeated within. That's the same thing that happened during the Crusades. During the Crusades, they had the best weaponry. The Syrians and the Lebanese, they actually made the best weapons. Can you imagine? Like it's exactly like speaking about nuclear nukes today, in speaking about best weaponry, but then you would have this enemy who doesn't have the best weaponry, but then they defeat us. So what did the Lebanese and the Syrians and the Palestinians actually do, and the Jordanians do to the Crusades? They actually went in order, because they were afraid of what happened to the Palestinians in Bayt al-Maqdis. They were like, oh, we're afraid that they might do the same thing in Halab. They might do the same thing in Dimashq. So what they did, they started gathering all the money and literally going in caravans just to give money to the Crusades so they could avoid, quote unquote, any possible rage from the Crusades, and perhaps do another massacre and a genocide similar to the one that they had done in Jerusalem. They were afraid that, oh, they're going to come to Halab, they're probably going to come to Dimashq, they're probably going to come to Noah, they're going to do the same thing. So why don't we just give them money? And then the Crusades, they used that money in order to get themselves better armed, in order to commit more genocides in Halab and in Dimashq and all of those. Just think of that. What were we defeated by? We were defeated within. We are, and throughout history, we're defeated from our within. Our identity, our izzah is shaken, and we become, I would say, defeated by our own selves. Our own nafs is what defeats us. And subhanAllah, here's not all Sufism bad or wrong, right? Why not take from Sufism what feeds the soul and leave what's wrong? Absolutely agree. Not all Sufism is bad, and not all Sufism is good. Why not take what is good and abandon what is wrong? Absolutely. But we definitely need the ilm to make sure that we do that. And that's what Ibn al-Qayyim had done. Ibn al-Qayyim, that's what he wanted to do. He didn't necessarily consider that everything in Sufism was wrong, and he didn't consider everything that was in Sufism being right. So in Madarij al-Salikin, that's what he was trying to do. He was taking from the Sufism that was good, and leaving out the different bid'ah. And if you actually go to the book of Ruh, you go to Madarij al-Salikin, you go to Talbis Iblis, you'll see that there was a lot that he had really learned from Sufism. So I'm against completely eliminating everything, from Sufism, but I'm also against taking everything, because there was, when we say, when we look at إن من البيان لسحرا, some of this eloquence can actually contain a lot of magic / delusion and can get us away from the right path. So if we have this foundation of ilm to be able to sift between what is an innovation and what is a bid'ah, because of the Prophet ﷺ was really crystal clear in the different hadith, whether al-Irbad ibn Sariya or whether hadith al-Irbad ibn Sariya, alaykum bi sunnati wa sunnat al-khulafa al-rashidin al-mahdiyyin min ba'di. Now why? Because in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, من يعش منكم فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا. If you live long enough, you're going to see so many differences that you had never seen before. And it's definitely not what the Prophet ﷺ had come with. They completely innovated, added things to the faith that's not even part of the faith. What did they do? Well, completely changed everything. So what should we do? He said, كل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Every single bid'ah, every single innovation is a delusion. It's a deviation. وكل ضلالة في النار. And every single deviation is basically leading to hellfire. So you have to have the ilm. If a person has the ilm to be able to sift away the innovation and actually get to the foundation, that's what Islam is. And to just live in certain ways where you would stay away from the different tazkiyah. There's definitely the most beautiful tazkiyah that you would find, the most beautiful tarbiyah. Let me use that word instead of tazkiyah. The most beautiful tarbiyah by far is the tarbiyah that the Sufis would get. By far. The tarbiyah that they would get, and that's basically the tarbiyah where there's the shaykh instructing his students to do dhikr, instructing the students to relate to the Quran, instructing the students to, and especially in places like Syria, in places like in Egypt, Sufism played a significant role in maintaining the deen within those societies. Because in order to join those groups, you had to join the groups not only for the tazkiyah, but even for talab al-ilm. So they were really instructing them in different areas of fiqh, different areas of tafseer, different areas of usul al-fiqh, different areas. When you look at al-Ghazali was far beyond any scholar perhaps during his time, one of the most important scholars. Of course, there were great scholars during his time, but al-Ghazali, of course, I would say he's probably the founding. Well, he's not the founding because, Sufis would actually say, hey, we go back all the way according to them. Depending on the tariqah, they'll tell you we go back to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq or we go back to Ahl al-Sufa, we go back to this. So I don't want to, right now get into this area, but I would say the most important mastermind in laying out Sufism is definitely بلا منازع إحياء علوم الدين. إحياء علوم الدين, al-Ghazali, who died 505 year Hijriya. But al-Ghazali was also one of the greatest scholars in philosophy, Tahafut al-Falasifa, one of the greatest scholars in usul al-fiqh, al-Mustasfa fi usul al-fiqh is the book that he had written. One of the best scholars in fiqh. He was a master in al-fiqh al-Shafi'i. He was a master in aqidah, when he was discussing Tahafut al-Falasifa and all of this. You could see that he was a master in every single field that he worked in. And even when it comes to tazkiyah, Ihya Ulum al-Din, Certainly, if you were to add تخريج العراقي, and what al-Iraqi had done was go over those hadith and sifting in his book al-Mughni an Haml al-Asfar, you could see that the ahadith in the way that he had classified Ihya Ulumuddin, it was, well, how can we get to the deen? How can we use our understanding of fiqh rather than seeing that the laws and the rules are a bunch of laws and rules that are separated away from their goal in affecting your nerves? He wanted to say, no, we need to revive the spirituality and the deen in people by letting them recognize what adab they should maintain. That was the key. Sufism is about adab, and that's what al-Ghazali was trying to do. He was trying to get into the masses the adab that they had forgotten, the adab that they had lost. So he was basically focusing on the different adab. And you want to keep in mind, certainly, not all adab necessarily have, I would say, evidences, authentic evidences from Quran and Sunnah to prove that that was an adab. And not because it's da'if that we would necessarily say we're going to reject this. Not because it's da'if. We're going to say we're going to reject it. Why? Because al-adab in general, al-ahadith al-da'ifa, they can be used as a source of inspiration for good behaviors, for adab. So, for example, you would see, I'll give you an example. Ibn Abbas, Zayd ibn Thabit, he comes, and what does Abdullah ibn Abbas do? He kisses his hand. Kisses his hand. He said, this is how the Prophet ﷺ taught us to greet our scholars. Zayd ibn Thabit then kisses Abdullah ibn Abbas's hand, and he tells him, this is how the Prophet ﷺ taught us to greet our salihin and to greet the itra. The itra is basically al-bayt. Al-itra, basically al-bayt. So do we necessarily have any evidence that this really was something that was practiced and that was encouraged by the Prophet ﷺ, which is kissing the hand? It wasn't an issue of kissing the hand. It was the whole concept of showing humility. And they were getting that inspiration. So a lot of the different ahadith da'ifa in regards to tazkiyah, although many would classify it as an innovation, it depends on how you use it. And it depends on how it's practiced, of course, and what type of understanding and interpretation are you making that reference necessarily say. And then we're going to say, okay, well, here's the parameter. So certain adab and certain tarbiyah was not necessarily taken from ahadith da'ifa or ahadith sahiha, but an inspiration certainly sometimes from ahadith sahiha and certainly sometimes from ahadith da'ifa. But in terms of adab, I don't think any other group has better adab in teaching. Adab, whether for the younger generation, the older generation, certainly some deviant shuyukh within the Sufi groups wanted to use and abuse the tariqas in order to somehow, I guess, control and somehow get to get to areas that definitely is not part of Islam, whether it's perhaps molestation, perhaps inappropriate things doing with women, inappropriate things doing to children, inappropriate things. There's definitely that is going to be found, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what Sufism teaches. Sufism is innocent of all of that. But certainly the method, the system may sometimes be abused by those that have ill intention and use it to the wrong way and for the wrong method. But is Sufism all wrong? The answer is absolutely not wrong. Absolutely not. There are great things in Sufism that we definitely need to learn from. And there are also, unfortunately, things that would also, I would say, you compare different groups, not all Sufis, but certain Sufis in what they had said. You look at al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah and the whole ideas, al-Hallaj, etc. The whole idea of paganism is really there when you say that Fir'aun, when and while he was drowning, this is what Ibn Arabi had said in al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah. He said, when you look, even though it's a very controversial book, but he said when he was drowning, that is Fir'aun, that he had somehow drowned in faith. He went into a station of connecting and believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that he basically just blended in faith. And you're like, what do you mean blended in faith? He's supposed to, it's crystal clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically tells him, al-ana wa qad asayt. There's no more there's no more clear term that you could use that this person was basically doomed in hellfire. So you could, and of course, others, that book is probably the most controversial, but anyhow, Ibn Taymiyyah wanted to support that not everything that was written in it is to be taken in a literal way, and that he did mean things in a way that is different than what people might have understood. At the end, definitely, I think it's not an extreme approach. Not everything in Sufism do not take, and not everything reject. That's all we could say. Okay, let's go back to, I guess, after finishing all of this, لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم ولكن يؤاخذكم بما عقدتم الأيمان. فكفارته إطعام 10 مساكين من أوسط ما تطعمون أهليكم أو كسوتهم أو تحرير رقبة، فمن لم يجد فصيام 3 أيام، ذلك كفارة أيمانكم إذا حلفتم، واحفظوا أيمانكم، كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تشكرون. So the question that one might ask is, how is this related to the other ayat? So we were talking about, let's look at it. We were talking about al-Qasisin, al-Ruhbana, and we were before that certainly talking about the Yahud and the Munafiqeen, and how they were taking the Christians and the Jews, or at least the different political forces that are probably out there fighting against Islam as their leaders, etc., and what we're supposed to be relating to in dealing with these groups. So we talked about that part. So how did we go from كلوا مما رزقكم الله حلالا طيبا واتقوا الله الذي أنتم به مؤمنون to a completely different topic, or so is it? What does the ayah actually say? The word is لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم. What is لا يؤاخذكم? لا يؤاخذكم means there's no sin upon you by Allah in the different oaths that you would do unwillingly. or at least you don't mean to make an oath. We're going to talk about the details. But the Lord Almighty hold you accountable for the oaths that you do with your complete intention to do that oath, you know? So it's like we have one that is intentional, and we have another oath that's not intentional, but it's just a word that one might use. The oath that is intentional, basically, if the person breaks that oath, then the expiation for it is as follows. Number one, feeding 10 needy people, and you're going to feed them based on, I guess, the average of what you would feed your family from, or you're going to close 10 people, or you're going to basically free a slave. Whoever cannot find, in other words, doesn't have the capacity to feed, close, or free, then they would have to fast 3 days. That is the expiation for breaking the oath, and you are obligated to preserve your oath. As such, the Lord Almighty clarifies the different ayat, the different verses, for you to be thankful. Okay, how did we get to speaking about al-Ayman? So it was a common thing. Remember, the ayah before was talking about كُلُوا مِمَّا رَزَقَكُمْ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا. Eat from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you as basically halal, something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala permitted for you. And the ayah before, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لَا تُحَرِّمُوا طَيِّبَاتِ مَا أَحَلَّ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. What was the case? Many were using different ways, again, for tazkiyah reasons. And what they were doing is that because they wanted to force themselves to do a certain thing, you know, it's kind of like you can't force yourself to memorize Quran. So you would say, Wallahi, I'm going to memorize Quran tomorrow, for example. Or you can't force yourself to fast. So you'd be like, Wallahi, I'm going to go fast tomorrow. Or you can't force yourself to donate, same thing. And you would basically make a yamin. What is this yamin? So il-yamin is basically a form of glorification that you're letting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be your place of witness. So you're basically saying, I'm going to have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala witness that I promise. This is not any promise, but this is a promise that I am promising, and Allah is a witness that I will be doing such and such. But here's one thing. The word wallahi, now that was very common, that they were trying, I guess, to force themselves to do what is right. So that's the context of why this ayah comes after a series of different ayat that we're talking about why you should not forbid what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded as halal, and how that one was related to the ruhban, that basically were monks, were considering, I guess, a type of life that was very ascetic, that was away from consuming any gas entertainment or any extra things, and therefore they lived in rahbana, in monasteries and ascetic life, and away from all of that dunya. So then this ayah lays out, well, what it means to be in moderation. You're not letting your gluttony take over you, and at the same time, you're not being too extreme in avoiding everything. You're living in moderation. But then, of course, some were using, well, let me force myself, and let me use this way of how I can force myself in order for me to stick to my regimen that I am promising myself to stick to. So I'll use wallahi, I'm not going to eat any cake, or I'm not wallahi going to do this and this. So that's that amen coming in right there. But because il-amen is a little somewhat complex, and you could see that al-Qurtubi said there are 47 different issues to talk about al-Ayman. I'm not going to go over all of them because this is really going to take a very long time, and I would say many are probably going to feel that it's probably too detailed. I would love to, but I don't want the sisters feeling that we're going too deep in fiqh and perhaps get lost. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to first break down the different rulings that are in this ayah, just this ayah. And two, I'm going to go in certain details in regard to this one. We're not going to do everything today, but we're going to do some things right now. Okay, let's just break down, speaking about fiqh, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to open up another area for us to understand it and basically lay it out over there and help you see it. Okay, here we go. And inshallah, let's look at it. So when you're looking at Yameen, there are different ways to do al-Yameen. What is the different way to do al-Yameen and what does it mean? So we're looking at al-Yameen. Al-Yameen means two things. Al-Yameen can mean right, like right hand, right side, okay? And could also mean an oath. What is an oath? An oath is basically putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the one that you would consider your area of blessing, and you would consider that he's a witness on what you're doing. So how is the yameen done? The yameen is supposed to be preceded, let's see, it's supposed to be preceded by either one. You could either say wallahi or billahi or tallahi, okay? Or you could use certain names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and descriptions. Wallahi al-Azim, for example, or perhaps different descriptions. Bil Qadir, or you're basically using any name of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't have to be Allah, okay? But this person is basically right there using one of the names or attributes or even details of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and waymullah, for example, walladhi nafsi biyadih, etc. All of that is basically here referring to Allah. So if you're referring to Allah in a name, for example, or a description of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then in that situation, that would be considered yameen. That would be considered an oath. Okay. Yameen oftentimes is confused with nadhr. Everybody, please pay attention. This is, I'm just trying to summarize for you perhaps 2 years of studying. Okay. Yameen and nadhr, they're actually two different areas, but many times they can actually come in similar ways. In nadhr, in English is also oath, but in Lugha Arabiya, in nadhr is different than yameen, okay? Just keep that one in mind. Il-Yameen, it can be, let's talk about Il-Yameen first. Il-Yameen, it can be used to do one, let's say, okay, hold on. Il-Yameen, it can be, oh, sorry about that, I'm trying to, okay, here we go. Sometimes you just get confused because you're trying to use two cursors and you're trying to use two different ways. Okay, here we go. Il-Yameen can be used, one, to perhaps talk about something that you are going to do in the future. Okay, so here we go. In the future, wallahi, I'm going to, let's say, do my PhD. Okay, wallah, I'm going to do this. Two, it can be used in the past. Wallah, I did not eat your food. Wallahi, I didn't eat your food. It can be used in a witness. Witness. Wallah, I did not see X give money to Y. Can be used in a way where you could probably right there, just something that you have on your lips always, and you don't mean it. It's just a habit. Don't mean it. And it's just a habit. What are we looking at? somebody's inviting you to dinner and you're like, wallah, 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 I don't want to eat, even though you really want to eat. But you're like, wallah, wallah, mjabari. Wallah, I don't feel like it. And this is very common, Somalis have the wallah habit. Okay, now let's look at these. Now, things that are yameen in the future, then the scholars you're looking at, okay, in the future, if you were wanting to do something, now that area of that in the future piece of it, that's the area that has a lot of commonalities with another. Another is that you are basically, you're putting something that is not obligatory as obligatory on yourself. That's another. Let's do it again. Another is different because another is that you're making something obligatory on yourself using the name of Allah. You know what that means? So let's say a person says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, lillahi alayh. I owe it to Allah that I will slaughter a goat. Lillahi alayh. You made it obligatory on yourself that you owe it to Allah. That you owe it to Allah. That piece that you owe it to Allah, that's another. Let me use that word. That you owe it to Allah.
I have a question.
Yep,
So,
go ahead.
when the grandfather of the Prophet ﷺ, when he made, was that another?
It was another, yes.
Okay.
It was another, and it was also a common custom that whenever someone would have 10 boys, they have to kill one of those boys. It's a very stupid, I know. They would have to kill one of those boys for the sake of the idols. Very stupid, like for the sake of an idol that you yourself actually, I guess sculptured. Very stupid, but that's what aqidat al-kufr is. It's extremely stupid. Okay, let's see. So in nadhr, many times people would think in nadhr is supposed to be, they would more think that in nadhr is what is called the nadhr al-mashroot. Nadhr al-mashroot is one of those types. What is that? Conditional nadhr. What does that look like? A conditional nadhr is what the Prophet ﷺ had actually said, لا يستخرج إلا من البخيل. It would be the nadhr, it would be the type of donation that would only come out of a person that is stingy. What does that look like? Many would think in nadhr is only this, but that's not the only kind. This is one kind of nadhr. What does that look like? Let's say somebody has a sick child, and they would say, if my child is cured, lillahi alayh, or by Allah, I will slaughter a goat. And I don't know, distribute it on the people in the Horn of Africa, for example. That's another al-mashroot. That's actually not liked. Why? Because you didn't recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you so many bounties, and you considered that you would not donate until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you a favor. But He's already given you all these favors. But you were like, I'm not going to donate till my son basically is cured. Okay? That's a conditional nadhr. All right? لا يستخرج إلا من البخيل. But do I have to? What if I didn't know that the Prophet ﷺ hated this type of nadhr? Do I still have to apply it if my son gets cured, for example, or they pass college or whatever it is? The answer is absolutely. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the Salihin, yufuna bin nadhr, because this is a commitment. It's a commitment. You put it upon yourself, but then it's a condition. And now you have to act responsibly and you have to apply it. Okay. Now, for al-yamin, look at this one. In the future, I would say, Wallahi, tomorrow I'm going to do this. So this is not nadhr. Okay. I said, Wallahi, not lillahi alayh. Okay. In the past, I basically said, Wallahi, I didn't eat your food yesterday. Witness, wallahi, I didn't see X give money to Y. Okay, here's one thing. So you're looking at these types of yamins. Some yamins, there is an expiation. Okay, there's an expiation. What does it mean to do an expiation? It's basically kafara. What is a kafara? A kafara basically means you are removing the sin. Let's say removing the sin off what you had basically wanted to commit yourself in, or committed yourself, or even what you had made an oath for. Okay, so what do? You basically want to do an expiation. What does that expiation look like? We're going to get to some things. Pay attention, please. So what does the expiation look like? Well, the expiation, let's go back to the ayah and actually see what it says. So let's see. It said, number one, إطعام عشرة مساكين. So therefore, we're going to feed 10 people. Not any 10 people. We're not going to make a party here, but we're feeding 10. They're needy people. They have to be miskeen. What does a miskeen look like? A miskeen is a person that basically doesn't have enough money. They can have money, but that money is barely covering their needs, their expenses. They probably have a car. They probably have a home, but they're struggling probably with rent, probably struggling with their utilities. Then in that situation, this is a miskeen. They do have a job, but they're barely making it. That's a miskeen. So you're going to pay, or you're going to feed 10 needy people. Okay, then what? Okay, so you're basically looking at your average. What's the cost of your average meal? Are you always putting meat in your food? Well, you want to make sure that you've got meat in their food too. It doesn't have to be a whole, I don't know, a whole meaty food, but then of course the meat is going to be more expensive. If not, if you're constantly eating caviar, well, you definitely are going to be paying a lot. Okay. I doubt anybody's constantly eating caviar, but anyhow, so you're going to look at the average cost of your meal, and you're going to be considering that average, and you're going to be considering that, okay, I need to feed 10 people. Can it be from the same family? Can it be something that is one person, and every single day I'm basically for 10 days, I'm going to be buying their lunch, for example? Differences of opinions. Okay. Does it have to be all at once? Can it be separated? Can I cook the meal and actually, I don't know, make them ma'lube, and it feeds 10 people, and send them ma'lube to their house? Is that okay? And I've got some salads on the side and some yogurt as well, and I'll put some, perhaps some good almonds on top, and some nice parsley, garnish it, and all of it. Here you go, set. It's a huge one, and I didn't make it with goat meat, but I made it with chicken. So yes, it's definitely cheaper. Okay, so is this awsat? Yes, but if you're continuous and you're always eating goat meat and not chicken, then in that situation, that's not awsat method. Okay, let's continue. Oh, kiswatuhum. What is al-kiswa? Al-kiswa is basically clothing. What type of clothes are you constantly basically buying? Are you buying your clothes from Mujaddara Works? Mujaddara can work, but is that awsat ma tat'imun? If you're constantly eating mujaddara in lentils and rice, well, if that's what your meal is, that should work. There are some scholars that consider that there has to be a condition of an idam, and the idam is basically that you would eat something with bread, but that's more of culture and not necessarily that. We'll talk about some of that details, inshallah. Right. So like I said, can we do a vegetarian ma'luba? I guess that would be interesting to see. But like I said, you want to focus on that awsat ma tut'imuna ahlikum, something that you would feed yourself and pay as an average. Okay, أو كسوتهم. What is الكسوة? الكسوة, of course, it basically is also looking at, well, where do you buy your clothes at? And you're going to consider that expiation for 10 people. So if you're constantly, or you're always buying your clothes perhaps at Walmart, then you can buy, I guess, 10 outfits from Walmart for clothing 10 people. Okay. And the 10 outfits, it doesn't mean, let's say if I'm getting boy number one, maybe I guess shorts and a shirt and probably socks, for example. Here's one outfit. Okay. Here's one outfit right there. Should we add shoes with it? What do we add? Remember, whatever you add, that's going to be a donation. Okay. And that's one. Okay. What about the woman? Perhaps the other one, hey, I'm getting her a abaya, and the man, I'm probably getting him, I don't know, a pair of jeans, or I don't know if they wear jeans, but yeah, I'm against wearing jeans, but anyhow, okay, just different clothes. So here's the kiswa right there. Tahrir raqaba. Tahrir raqaba is basically freeing slaves. That was at the time that they were freeing slaves, that there were slaves. Right now, there's no freeing slaves because there's no slavery anymore. Slavery was abolished. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ. So this is the condition. If you don't find any of these, I guess, options, or you can't afford it, then that's when you would fast 3 days. Do they have to be consecutive? In other words, I do it Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, or can it be on different days? ذلك كفارة أيمانكم إذا حلفتم. So let's go back to our word right there, the document, and actually go in details. Okay, so here's what you want to take in consideration. That for al-kafara, is al-kafara or the expiation in all of these? So in the future, if I said, Wallahi, I'm not going to visit, let's say, that woman right there because I heard that she said something bad about me. Okay. So I basically made this yameen. Generally speaking, il-yameen is supposed to be applied. But there is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ actually said, no, let's look at this one. من حلف على يمين فرأى غيرها خيرا منها فليأتي الذي هو خير وليكفر عن يمينه. So what does that mean? The Prophet ﷺ said, let's look at this hadith. Whoever makes an oath and then they basically see that another option was better than that, then what they need to do what is good. In other words, they regret doing that oath and they felt, oh, I shouldn't have actually done that. Then in that situation, فَلْيَأْتِ الَّذِي هُوَ خَيْرٌ. Do what you need to do and وَلْيُكَفِّرْ عَنْ يَمِينِهِ, and just pay the expiation on behalf of that yameen. So therefore, in situations where you probably said, I'm not going to visit X or Y and Z, then in that situation, hey, you regret and you felt that I shouldn't have said that. I was wrong about this. Then in that situation, do what is right and do the kafara. Let's look at the past. What about the past? There's a difference between things and where you're a witness on something and between a past of something. So let's say someone asked you, hey, did you eat the cookies on the counter? You said, Wallah, I didn't eat them. Wallah, I didn't eat them. And then when you said, Wallah, you didn't eat them, let's just assume that you actually did eat them. And you know that. But you said, Wallah, I didn't eat them because you wanted to get away from the consequence of getting punished or scolded for eating something that's not yours. In that situation, that's a blatant lie. Scholars had differences of opinions on whether the person can just pay the expiation or whether in other words, they can't just do the expiation, which is what we talked about, or whether they're held accountable and that they're supposed to do is istighfar, because this is far beyond. Okay, so just to keep that in mind, because that debate between scholars is basically a big debate. Majority of the scholars actually considered that right there, you would have to pay the expiation That's a yamin that you had made. That's the way to teach you how to take in consideration the position of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You had made Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your witness, that in that situation, you would have to discipline yourself and you would basically pay the expiation of feeding 10 people or clothing 10 people, or you're going to be freeing a slave. And if you can't afford any of that, then you're going to be fasting 3 days. Okay, that's the past one. Let's look at the witness one. The witness one is rather different. What is that? Well, the witness one, that's the most dangerous. If the person, let's say, I basically have X and Y. X is claiming that Y owes her $10,000. And you were there. You had seen X and Y. You guys were together at a restaurant, and then Y said that that Y was going to give X $10,000 and that she owes it to her, and that was basically because they wanted to sell their car. It was just an issue of signing the title. That's it. The car was actually sold, but it was just the title and a signature on the title that was left. You were both, everyone, all of the three, they were sitting there. But then Y denied that they had agreed to sell the car. Guess Y got a better offer. So she said, I don't even know. I didn't sell the car. No, I didn't. Said, well, remember, we told you $10,000. And then right there, you were a witness. But then Y, of course, they were all invited to court. So Y bribed that witness and said, hey, I want you to witness that I did not sell the car. I want you to witness that. And I'll give you, I don't know, $600. That bribery and that witness, somebody might say, well, hey, let's say they give you $600. You're like, I'll pay the expiation. That'll cost me like $200 or so. Here we go. I'll take them to Chipotle or something, a restaurant, and buy them 10 dinners, and that's going to cost me a lot less. Going to be costing me probably $200. Not bad. And the rest, I'll basically have it in my account, and there we go. And this for this. This is Yamin al-Ghamus. Yamin al-Ghamus. The Prophet ﷺ said, تَذَرُ الدِّيَارَ بَلَاقِعَ. Yamin al-Ghamus is one of those oaths that the Prophet ﷺ said, if a whole city were to make this yamin, it would leave the city to basically ground. The person, it will come back to them in their health, in their wealth, and probably in their family, etc. Because they put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the witness, and by Allah, they made this yamin and they were lying about it, whether they took money or whether they were afraid. This witness, by using wallahi and making this haram witness, scholars even had differences of opinions on whether there is even a kafara for it or not. Whether there is a kafara or not. That's a very scary one. Now, looking at these, finally, the lips don't mean it. This is called yamin al-lahu. What is al-lahu? Al-lahu basically means just a word, a habit that someone might say, just, wallah, I'm not hungry. Wallah, I'm not this. Now, it's important to keep in mind that when you're looking at the ones that are in the future, in particular, wallah, I'm going to, let's say, telling your child, wallah, I'm going to spank you if you don't do this. Now, scholars then had differences of opinions on whether it must be repeated or not. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean? So let's say you said they mean once. And did you really mean it? Or how do we know whether it was meant or not? All right. Did you repeat it to do the confirmation? Well, that's the word munaqida. So when you look at the word munaqida, does that now literally the word actually means confirmed. Okay. So when you do a confirmation, does that mean an internal feeling that you are attempting and that you're confirming on the inside that I really mean this oath? Or does it have to be repeated that, yeah, I might have said, wallah, you're not going to play this game tomorrow. And you on the inside, you're like, yeah, I know that I meant it. But then some scholars said that no, it's not enough to let your heart and that you determine and that you really mean it on the inside. Some scholars said in order for it to be mun'aqida, that there needs to be a confirmation. What does the confirmation look like? They said, well, the confirmation actually means that it's repeated. That I said, wallah, you're not going to play tomorrow. Wallah, you're not going to play tomorrow. And then did it again, wallah, you're not going to play tomorrow. Some scholars actually said that in order for it to be a munaqida. Just wanted to lay all this out for you. So we're looking at what is a yamin ghamus, what is al-yamin al-laghu, what is al-yamin al-munaqida, what does this look like, what does the expiation mean, the details of expiation, what if this, so those scenarios are basically the areas that the Tafseer al-Qurtubi in 47 different matters basically goes into one after another to explain one after another. During my college time, just al-Ayman wal-Nudhur, it's basically a whole, I think one of the best books for Abdul Qadir Abu Faris. Abdul Qadir Abu Faris did a wonderful, wonderful book. It's actually called Kitab al-Ayman wal-Nudhur. That was the book that we studied in. Wonderful book and so organized. I think it's one of the best organized books. Anyhow, so al-Ayman wal-Nudhur, it was 2 lectures a week. 3 hours, 3 hours every week, actually 2.5 hours almost, yeah, almost like that. So we're looking at it was a Sunday and a Tuesday, and every single one of those days, it was going to be 3 hours, and for 5 months. I'm just letting you know what and how much time it was taking to learn al-Ayman wal-Nudhur, and even though we're just really talking al-Ayman wal-Nudhur. Okay, so let's calculate that. It would be really interesting. Chat GPT, ask them, right? How many total hours of just lecturing, right? Let's go to Chat GPT and really ask how much would that be? Let's see. Yeah, I'm right there. I'm just excited to know how long that would take. Okay. Let's word it. A class is, so 3 hours or 2 classes, let's say 2 classes, each 2 classes each week. Okay. And every class is 3 hours for 5 months. How many total hours? Okay. 120 total hours. Don't worry, I'm not going to use that hours. I'm not going to use that timing, right? I'm not going to use that timing to explain all of this. Don't worry. I'm not going to abuse you that much. At least I think I won't, but no. That was just sharh. And yeah, we did take al-Adahi though. That's fair to say. Okay. Inshallah, we will be taking the different matters and just skimming over them, you could see I'm not going to go over everything, but some of those things, I guess, we'll go over. Some of those things we'll talk about, some scholars here and there, and just so that, we would learn at least an idea of some of the different rulings that relate to it. And inshallah, that's what we'll be doing these coming days. It's going to be exciting. So future Gems of Light classes, exactly. Ayman wa Nudur. We should actually do it that way. That this is Ayman wa Nudur. So join us for Ayman wa Nudur in our tafsir. All right. Yes. But yeah, I'm excited. I mean, let's look at it. We're talking about, I should have actually looked at how many pages is his 47. Should have actually done that, right? Let's see, what are we looking at here? Ayah 88 and 89? Yeah, 89. So let's see until when. Okay, so here's Ayah 90. Oh man, I forgot what page that was on. Okay, here we go. So we're looking at here's Ayah 90. Just remember 156. What page were we on? Okay, so from 156 to 121, minus that one. 156 to 1, Azidin, minus 156, minus 121. What are we looking at? 5? Yeah, seriously? 35 pages. Not too bad. Okay, not too bad. All right, so this is what we'll be doing, inshallah. Right? Any questions before we leave?
Yeah. So I remember you had taught about this before.
Okay.
Didn't you say that the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be upon a person who made that oath as a witness knowingly, on purpose, in a court, lied?
In a purpose, say that again, Nura. For some weird reason, I couldn't understand what you were saying.
Oh, sorry. So I thought I remember you when you taught this before, that if a person they were a witness and they lied in court, that the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be upon that person.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what we're saying. When you say if that's not a curse, I don't know what is. That's a curse right there. When you're saying that's a curse.
And wouldn't you agree that the best thing is just to not use those words? I mean, not get used to it with your tongue saying it?
That's absolutely right. I mean, the best thing is don't get used to making amen, because Ilyamin has a consequence. Just make sure you don't get into that habit and then regret it. That's it. So, inshallah, we'll see you all.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Sister Khadija, you're sounding great. I love your voice.
Now, how are you?
Very good. Alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. I really enjoyed the class. Now, I have a question. The last one you mentioned, that if someone is saying wallahi maybe one time, is there a kafara for that? I didn't understand the kafara for that one.
Well, that's what we're gonna talk about.
Okay.
Yeah, that area. Well, how does it become munaqida? Like, how does it become confirmed? How do I know? Is it just enough to say, well, I had the gut feeling, I somehow felt on the inside, hey, my heart, hear me, you, here's what I really mean by these words that I'm saying. It's like, is this what it means, or does it have to be repeated? That's what we're going to talk about, inshallah, next week, tomorrow.
Oh, inshallah. May Allah spare our life today.
All right, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
So, inshallah, excited about tomorrow. Stay tuned. And inshallah, can I say wallahi? And what about inshallah? Stay tuned.
Say inshallah.
Inshallah. So if
Well,
you say
guess what?
wallahi, if you say
Can
wallahi,
you
that means you are going to explain to us.
exactly, there you go. I'm just trying
No,
to trick you right
no.
there. And by the way, some scholars actually said if I were to say wallahi and say inshallah, that basically nullifies the yameen. Does it? Or does it not? Stay tuned for more. I know, exactly. It's like, really?
That was
Yes,
a tight corner.
exactly. So stay tuned for more, inshallah, and see you tomorrow, inshallah. Don't say wallahi until you get more details.